Welcome to Raised on D&D podcast. Each month, Raised on D&D brings you inspirational interviews with tips and strategies to enrich your family's gaming experience. Your host for Raised on D&D has been a game master for 30 years and father to 3 gamers. Here is Nick Cardarelli.
Welcome back, gamers. I'm your host, Nick Cardarelli, and this is Raised on D&D. My next guest is originally from Newcastle, England, and currently lives and works in Haarlem, Netherlands. He is the creator of Amazing Tales, a role-playing game for players ages 4 and up. Please welcome Martin Lloyd. Hi, Martin.
Hi, Nick. Great to be here.
Thanks for being on the show. We're so excited to have you. Amazing Tales is a huge role-playing game for parents and their younger children, and for families. Amazing Tales has over 4,000 followers on Facebook alone, and you're coming out with the big book of Amazing Tales. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we're kind of getting to the layout stage now with that, and some parts of it have already been released as sort of standalone chapters people can buy, and the whole thing will be finished in the next few months, hopefully.
That's fantastic. We're looking forward to all of that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Amazing Tales, but first we want to kind of get to know you as a gamer. So Martin, can you take us back, tell us how you were introduced to tabletop role-playing games? How did that love of role-playing games all get started? Sure.
I first got into tabletop gaming full stop via Games Workshop, which I think was a pretty standard route for gamers my age from the UK. My friends and I, we'd only just discovered this amazing shop and all these interesting games they had, starting off with the Warhammer tabletop battles. And we got a subscription to the White Dwarf in-house magazine they had. And with that, you could get some free stuff with your subscription. And we didn't realize at the time, but they were ditching stock. And we didn't know what any of this stuff was. So I ended up with a copy of the rules for RuneQuest. I don't know what edition it was, possibly second edition, but it had lots of cool pictures and lots of really quite crunchy rules.
Yes, RuneQuest had all those charts and tables that you had to roll on, right?
Lots of charts, lots of tables. Combat was organized by strike ranks, which were about 1/10 of a second or something. Yeah, it was, heavy. But for kind of, however old I was, about 12-year-old me, this was fantastic. I just loved the idea of it, the look of it, and I kind of read the what is a role-playing game thing. I was like, right, I've got to try that. So my friends and I, we did try that. And they didn't go very well because although there were rules for everything, there was almost nothing in that huge thick rule book about how to run a good role-playing game. There's nothing about, really basic stuff like make sure there's a plot, don't all play the same kind of character. There wasn't a sample adventure in the books. There, it was all there, but there was none of the soft stuff around it about how to actually play the game was there.
So it wasn't that they were hardcore war gamers that were trying out role-playing for the first time. It was more of RuneQuest. It didn't have the structure to help the game master construct an adventure. Is that it?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there was a quite detailed kind of description of play. So we knew, looking at that, if a fight happens, this is the order of steps you have to follow. But there wasn't anything about, you should probably have a hook for your adventure and you should probably put the encounters in some sort of order. And this would be an appropriate monster for a first level character or a starting character to face and that kind of thing. There was none of that. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was in other books, maybe it wasn't. But since by this point, Games Workshop had stopped selling anything that wasn't Games Workshop, there was also no means of getting any further RuneQuest material. So it was a bit of a false start, but it kind of convinced me that this was a good thing and I should try and do more of it when I got the chance. And it was some years before I actually blundered my way into an established gaming group who knew what they were doing. And yeah, from that point on, I didn't really look back.
So amazing. So that first rough start didn't really deter you from role-playing games, and you were able to try it years later. So fast forward, you're a father now, right?
That's right. Yeah. 2 children, Lisa and Ruben, aged 11 and 9.
Okay. Real close to mine. Mine are 11, 12, and 14. When did you first introduce them to tabletop role-playing games?
Let's see. I think my daughter was 4 when I first played a game with her, and I think it was the same for my son. 4 had kind of struck me as about the right age. And my daughter and I were sitting on the sofa one day, and it was raining, and we were bored. And so I was like, okay, let's make up a story together. And I got my dice because, kids love looking at those interesting gaming dice.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just kind of went from there. And I made up the simplest system I could think of. That eventually ended up becoming Amazing Tales.
That's incredible. A rainy day with your 4-year-old daughter, and you end up creating something that will turn into a game that is played by families really all around the world on rainy days with their children. That's wonderful. Martin, how did it go from casual gaming on the couch with your daughter to creating this amazing, expanding, Amazing Tales system?
Yeah, so for that one, I can thank my previous employer. So at the time, I was working for Greenpeace, and one of the benefits of working for Greenpeace is that after 10 years in the job, you get a paid sabbatical. So I was entitled to a 4-month paid sabbatical to go and do whatever I wanted.
Wow.
And so I decided that what I wanted to do was try and turn it into a game. That, I wanted to have a project. I wanted to get something done. It wasn't going to be learn a language or something like that. I was going to make my game. So I didn't know quite how ambitious to be at the start. One model I had in my head was Lady Blackbird, which is the sort of, I think it's about 4 or 5 page PDF you can download. It's got 2 pieces of art. It's been hugely successful. It's a great game. I thought, if I can do something like that, that would be pretty cool. But, I started writing, and I just started thinking, well, I'm going to need some art, so I should try and find an artist. And as it turned out, one of my colleagues had just become a freelance artist, and she was excited about the project, and I was excited about working with her, and that suddenly made everything possible. So from there, it was kind of, okay, I actually have the time, and I have enough money available, and I have someone who wants to work on this with me, so I can make a whole book. So a lot of lucky things came together to make that possible, and so I got it all written. We got all the art briefed, and kind of and then we just had to take the time for the artwork to get finished. That's always the bit that takes the longest on these projects. And so about a year after I started my sabbatical, I had the first copy in my hands.
Wow, that's incredible. And so did it take you the whole 4 months to write it out, and then you just had to wait for the artwork after that? No,
it was actually quite a bit quicker. I mean, Amazing Tales is only 12,000 words or so. It's quite a short book.
Okay.
So no, I think I spent the first month of the sabbatical just kind of staring at the ceiling, getting over the sort of exhaustion I've accumulated over the previous 10 years. Yeah, no, it was quite a quick process to write it. And I find that's how I work, is that kind of stuff bounces around in my head and I think about it, but I don't start. And then eventually I kind of get to this point where I'm like, right, I know what I'm doing now. Sit down, write it. And then there's lots of revision to do. But the actual process of writing Amazing Tales was pretty quick, less than a month all in, certainly.
Wow. Now, Amazing Tales has grown, though. Now you have expansions. I know during this quarantine, you've released several supplements for people to download off of DriveThruRPG for free. Is that right?
That's right. One of the things that when the whole quarantine thing started, it struck me that, Amazing Tales was a good thing for people at this stage, that or role-playing in general. If you're stuck in the house all day and you can't leave and you've got to entertain your kids and yourself, then a role-playing game is great. You can't go outside, but you can go on an adventure, that kind of idea. And when I wrote Amazing Tales, I was very much of the kind of mindset that people should invent their own stories. The best way to play this is for people to go out and invent their own stuff. But what I discovered through feedback is a lot of people either aren't that confident or just prefer to play with pre-written things.
Yeah, it's easier to plug and play if you've got the material. Especially the confusion is, or the misunderstanding is that the quarantine has given people more time. Well, that's not entirely true. I know here in the States, the children have been in school online, which has been almost 8 hours a day. A lot of families are working from home, so they're on the internet all the time. And so because of that, there's this well, you're stuck in your house, so there's more time. For some families, there isn't. So you releasing these supplements has been wonderful, because you can just download it, you have it right there, and you can take it right to the table and run something immediately, which gives the families who don't have the time for all that game master prep work to actually go ahead and start gaming right away. So that was fantastic. And you said you actually received feedback from fans asking you for the supplements. Is that right?
Yeah, people were saying, I've got this, but I would like more adventures. Is there pre-written stuff to work with? So I decided, there should be. And the first iteration of those things is the Big Book of Amazing Tales, which is a set of 4 campaigns, so series of interlinked adventures. But for these quarantine one-shots, I just told myself, I'm going to write an adventure. It's going to fit on one piece of paper. That's my target, the first one. And it should use some of the artwork that's in the book. So I wrote the first one, and I liked it, and I put it out. And I sort of thought, well, we'll see what people think. And I think on its first day, it had, a few hundred downloads. So I thought, well, that went quite well. I'll write the second one. And on it went. And I set myself the target of doing an adventure for every piece of character art in the book. But I didn't tell anybody that, because I'm not a great completer finisher. But as it turns out, I did make it through. So there are now 21 of these adventures, and they all fit on one piece of paper. And there's all kinds of things in there. There's a procedural dungeon crawler, because I wanted to see if I could write one. There's a traditional dungeon crawl. There's an adventure where you all get shrunk and sent to defuse a bomb from the inside. There's an adventure for very little kids about a very rainy day that happens by a riverbank, and what happens to all the animals when there's lots of rain. There's all kinds of stuff in there, and I had a ton of fun writing them. It was quite exhausting, but turned out 21 adventures in 21 days. And
wow, 21 days, and they're beautiful. They have the artwork, like you said, from the book. They have, some of them have maps. I know Forsaken Crypt of the Serpent Master, that has a map. It's a beautifully written one pager. And then that one was really interesting. So I love the there's a link in the adventure to the map generator I used. And so I set myself a challenge. I said, I'm going to go to the webpage. I'm going to take the first map it gives me, and I'm going to write an adventure. And so that's how that happened. And it wasn't called the Crypt of the Serpent Master or whatever, because it generates titles as well. Maybe it was. I can't remember. But I took the map and then looked at the structure of it, and kind of why are there these rooms that aren't connected to anything, and there's a big room over there at the end that's like the boss chamber, that kind of thing. And and just tried to turn it into an adventure. And I like how they have different themes. Obviously we have the pirate theme. My boys are real big into pirates. So Sailing the Upside Down Sea was definitely one that we were looking at. We're hoping to game on soon. And then I like how you have Cantina Crisis, and that's a sci-fi adventure.
Yeah, they're all just kind of, because there's those 4 settings in the book, and then each piece of artwork needed an adventure. So I covered the 4 sets of adventures that are in Amazing Tales. So there's the Deep Dark Woods stories, which are really for smaller kids mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Magical Kingdoms long ago, and there I kind of split a bit. So about half of them are in this kind of quite traditional Dungeons and Dragons world, with kind of princes and princesses, and it's all very noble and King Arthur-y. And the other half are a bit more kind of sword and sorcery, weird temples and crazy wizards and that kind of stuff. Then the pirate adventures were lots of fun. And I've just put out, or during the middle of all of this, I think I put out part 2 of the big book of Amazing Tales, which is Captain Cadaver's Treasure, which is a big pirate story. And in there are a bunch of random encounter tables, for one for each of the 7 pirate seas. And when we were writing those, there was this one prompt for an encounter, which was just, you're looking over the side of your pirate ship and your reflection waves back to you. And then I thought, oh, well, I really liked that one. I thought, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to see if I can make it into a 1-page adventure. So that's where Sailing the Upside Down Sea came from.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the last one's the sci-fi ones.
Now, for people who are not familiar with Amazing Tales, a lot of your fans are listening right now, but a lot of folks who haven't tried Amazing Tales are listening as well. Tell us a little bit about the mechanics and how it's different from other role-playing games that people may have played.
Yeah, so the mechanic is singular. I think there is only really one. And that is that you have a bunch of skills. Your 4 skills each have a different dice assigned to them, from a D12 down to a D6. And if you want to do something, you pick the appropriate skill and roll a dice. And if it comes up as a 3 or more, it worked. And if it comes up as a 1 or a 2, something got worse. So the situation has got worse. And that's
wonderful.
Basically the rules.
Very basic, easy for younger players to grasp, and yet still a lot of fun because it incorporates different types of dice for older children. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I've played this with adults, and it works just fine. And I'm certainly for kind of beer and pretzels, let's make up an amazing adventure kind of game. It's great.
Now, you also don't restrict your characters, aren't restricted to classes, or they're not boxed in with different kinds of, like, to a specific genre. Your son created a very interesting character, and it's kind of iconic art of Amazing Tales. Can you tell us about the children's first characters that they made? Yeah,
so King Tyrannosneak is Ruben's, I don't think he was his first character, but certainly his most memorable character, one of his very early ones. King Tyrannosneak is a robot dinosaur ninja king. You might have worked that out from his name. He has 4 arms, which he uses to hold his 2 swords and his 2 shields. He is very stealthy, and he's very good at fighting. And I think he has some kind of amazing radar sensors as well. I believe those were part of the deal. And he lives on a planet made of lava and inhabited by other robot dinosaurs. He reads Dinosaur Fighting Weekly, and he likes drinking oil beer. I think those are the key things we need to know about King Tyrannosneak.
This was Ruben's, one of his earlier characters, and he made all that up, right?
Yeah, and this is absolutely how I suggest people play the game, is sit down with your kids and say, what kind of adventure do you want to be in, or what kind of hero do you want to be? And maybe the first time, people tend to stick quite closely to pictures that are in the book or whatever, but kids, then they will tell you, they will get the idea that they can be anything they want, and that is a powerful, powerful proposition for a kid, and they just start thinking of stuff. And they will be inspired by whatever happens. A friend of mine said, I was playing with my son the other night, and I guess he's been studying this at school, because he said, Dad, I want to play Amazing Tales, and we're all going to be different kinds of bacteria.
Wow.
So, right, okay. This is a 7-year-old coming up with, let's be bacteria and let's go into a human body or something. And I don't know what the plan from there was, but it sounded pretty cool.
It does. So that is an amazing concept. And, And that's the thing. We talk about on Raised on D&D all the time about how with children learning to game, it's very important to not say no. You can say yes, however, but never to say no. And I think Amazing Tales really emphasizes that with allowing children to come up with any kind of character that they want to be and have those abilities, because you're saying yes. And like you said, it is a powerful tool to be able to tell a child or any player, create any kind of character you want. So many of us older gamers are used to being put on these rails. You can't have a centaur because we're going on a dungeon crawl and he won't fit. Those kind of things. But Amazing Tales doesn't put that kind of restriction on its players.
Yeah, I think a lot of role-playing mechanics are basically ways of squashing down or constraining your creativity. We do a lot of that without really thinking it through. So the big promise of a role-playing game is you can be anything you want. But actually, kind of D&D has a whole load of classes, but across maybe 6 or 7 classes and 6 or 7 races, anything you want turns out to mean 49 different things.
Yes. Yep. And
only, a dozen of those are viable if you're interested in the kind of min-maxing approach or whatever. So,
right.
I much prefer systems that give people a bit more freedom.
Yes. And especially, with it being newer players or younger players. And what I really like is your one sheet, 21 Adventures in 21 Days that you did for families kind of under restraint from this quarantine, is if I want a robot 4-armed dinosaur in the pirate adventure, I can, right? I don't have to make a character for that genre.
No, not at all. Take your robot dinosaurs and go looking for pirates. That's my advice.
Good. And the other one that I wanted to talk about is Rescue City, which is your first responder adventure setting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Rescue City came about because of some questions I got asked on Facebook. So a couple of people, roughly the same time, I got questions about how do I run non-violent games. Mm-hmm. I like these role-playing games, but they do all seem to be about fighting. I don't want that for my kids. How do I get around that? And one of these people I wrote back to with a slightly flippant answer. I just said, well, if you don't like fights, don't put any in. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to the next kind of thought, which was what should go there instead. So I wrote a few blog posts about different ways of putting encounters together that wouldn't require violence, because also endless fights gets boring, right? So for anyone, it's good to be able to mix it up. And then that led to the sort of final thought in the chain, which was what kind of setting would you be able to put all these things together in that would lead to exciting but non-violent adventures? And so I realized that kind of disaster movies, this is kind of where you're aiming for, or police movies or that kind of stuff. So you're looking at these kind of first responder type roles, fire, police, and ambulance kind of people, and saying, right, these people have really exciting jobs. They do really exciting things every day, but pretty much it doesn't involve violence. And so that became the Rescue City setting, which is all about kind of, you are heroes, you are ordinary people, the kind of hero you might meet walking down the street, and then, go save things. A helicopter's crashed into the skyscraper. Can you go and get the people out? There's a hurricane coming. Can you deal with that? There's a hurricane coming and the helicopter's crashed. That's probably the best way to do it. These kind of techniques certainly work best if you kind of mash a few encounters together at once to create something really interesting. And that's where Rescue City came from.
And what I really like about it is you have character descriptions for firefighters, for law enforcement, for emergency medical technicians. And so if for Rescue City, if your table of players wants to be characters from that setting, you've provided that information in the book. But if I want to play a robot dinosaur in Rescue City, I can. It's not a restriction. I don't have to be a firefighter to save people from the burning building. I can be a robot dinosaur.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rescue City is kind of halfway towards being a superhero setting as well.
Good.
It's not. But that is the other thing I get asked for a lot is, will there be a super setting? The answer to which is eventually. I think it's kind of on the list. But lots of the stuff superheroes deal with is in Rescue City, collapsing buildings or big fires or whatever.
And, I don't think a lot of people realize if they visit drivethrurpg.com and they type in Amazing Tales into the search, not only are they going to see all of these things, and like we mentioned earlier, you gave away 21 adventures during this quarantine. They're free to download, can start playing right away. But as PDFs, Rescue City is $2.99. So for $3, I've got a setting with some character expansion in there and the scenarios. It's fantastic. And you have in there 10 story seeds. Now, for folks who are interested in Amazing Tales but haven't tried it yet, what are adventure seeds?
So an adventure seed is it's just one or two sentences, but it is everything you need to start creating an adventure. So rather than give people complete scenarios, I give people these little seeds and then work it out together with your kid. The whole of the adventure will come together from there. So hang on, I just grab my book here and pick one. Here's one from the Magical Kingdoms setting. So the first part is mermaids have invited the prince to an undersea party. Will the heroes accompany him? And the twist is that a mermaid falls in love with the prince and they will not let him go. So the first part of that is, your heroes are presumably friends of the prince, or maybe you're his bodyguards, or maybe the king's told you to find out where he goes and spends his time. Who knows? And you eventually end up at this mermaid party, and you can ask your kids, what do mermaids do at a party? Where do they live? What's it like? How do you get down there? One thing that my kids and I have established as true in our games is that if you want to meet mermaids, you have to sing for them. So you have to go down to the sea and sing, which means you have to actually sing in the game. So if you go and stand by the sea and sing a song, then hopefully a mermaid will appear. And depending on how well you sing, you might get a happy mermaid or a grumpy one.
I like that as the game master, you incorporate the children into the description. You ask the players, what does a mermaid party look like? How do we get down there? So not only is the burden of coming up with fantastical ideas alleviated for the game master, but you're getting the players' buy-in. When they can contribute to the creation of the setting or the how we get there, it invests them so much more into the story. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, games mastering is hard work, right? So
yes.
So it's good if you can spread it around a bit. And this is what I mean about when I said when I first wrote Amazing Tales, I was very much, just do it. You don't need pre-written stuff. Just go for it. So you can take one of these seeds and start asking your kids questions, and the story will come from there. That's I find a very enjoyable way to play.
We like to say that role-playing games are cooperative storytelling, and I think with Amazing Tales, it really incorporates that more because now the players aren't just being led on a rope through the adventure as much as they are being able to create it and add things to it and things like that. Your example of singing to get the mermaids' attention and to get entrance into the mermaid realm, was that something that children came up with as well? No,
that was something I came up with. And I think it was, Why did I do that? I think possibly they were just being a bit boisterous and I wanted them to focus a little bit. So I was like, okay, sing a song for me now. But it worked. But yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time. So I will just throw stuff out that the kids have to work out what to do with. It's coming up with puzzles and challenges where I don't know the answer in advance sounds like lazy games mastering, but it makes for really good stuff. So my favorite example is the characters were in a forest and this kind of shadow monster appeared and attacked them. And my son just said instantly off the top of his head, well, I parry with my shadow. So with the shadow of my sword, I will parry the shadow monster. And I thought that was brilliant. And so that was immediately true. And if you get attacked by shadow monsters in other systems, then it kind of depends what's already written in the rules, whether that kind of thing works or not. But I like the freedom to just have stuff occur and happen as you go.
And because you didn't have those rails in place, you didn't have to say to Ruben, well, no, that's not how it works, because with shadow monsters, you need a sword with light on it.
Or a blessed weapon or something.
You were able to just say, well, that not only is that creative and brilliant, but it makes sense. And one of the nice things is when you're gaming with children, because they haven't had years of being trained to look at fantasy adventures in a box, they're able to go, well, it's a shadow monster and I have a shadow, so I'll parry with my shadow. That's amazing, but that shows you the perception of how children can look at a scenario and go, this a fantastical scenario, and come to a logical conclusion on how to address it. And again, you're not saying no, you're saying, okay, let's do that. That sounds great. So Martin, we want to talk about the Big Book of Amazing Tales. Now, it's coming out in the next couple of months. It's got 4 campaign settings. How big is the Big Book of Amazing Tales?
It's going to be a little bit more than 200 pages, probably, which is about twice the size of the basic Amazing Tales book. There's 4 campaigns in there and a few supporting bits. So Rescue City is going to be in there because it was funded out of the same Kickstarter. There's going to be an essay on using role-playing games as therapy for kids, written by a therapist I've been working with. And there's going to be an essay on using Amazing Tales in the classroom, which I know is something else that also happens. So those are the kind of the extras. And then the core things, there's The Quest for the Dragon Crown, which is already out, which is an adventure in the sort of magical kingdoms setting. There's Captain Cadaver's Treasure, which is the pirate adventure. The next thing that will be out will be The Cryptid Conundrum, which is a science fiction adventure with a lot of focus on codes and code breaking and that kind of stuff. So you can introduce some of that to your kids if they're old enough. And the last one is going to be called A Dream of Trees, which is the deep dark wood setting. And that is both, again, for very little kids, but it also turned out to be, in some ways, the most ambitious campaign of the lot. It'll take place as a child grows up, spread out over about 12 years. There's kind of slightly different dimensions and things going on, but hopefully all presented in a way that if your player is 4 or 5 years old, they don't actually need to really follow all that stuff. They just need to be fairies at it and it'll all work. But if you've got an older player at the kind of 8 or 9 years old, then they'll find all these extra things to engage with.
Well, this is fantastic. We're so excited about the big book. We are so excited about what's going to be coming next. The 21 adventures in 21 days. It's there. We're going to be able to start playing those right away in anticipation of the Big Book of Amazing Tales. Martin, I want to thank you again for being on the show. Thank you so much for Amazing Tales. It's a wonderful, wonderful game. We're so happy that it's expanding and new stuff is coming out all the time for it. I hope that the families who are listening, I know all your fans are listening to today, but I hope that our folks who have heard of Amazing Tales but haven't tried it yet, I hope they're going to run over to Drive Through RPG and get themselves a copy. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.